The execution of Jesus stands as the climax of redemptive history. Therefore, the Gospels dedicate disproportionate space to his final days. In fact, biblical scholars frequently categorize the Gospel of Mark as a passion narrative appended to an extended introduction. But there is a notable gap in these accounts. The Gospels rigorously document the historical sequence of the trial, the suffering, and the physical execution, yet they largely reserve explicit commentary on its theological mechanics. While the Gospel writers drop hints regarding Jesus' innocence and divine love, they do not provide a comprehensive architecture explaining how the cross actually functions to save humanity. To understand the cosmic significance of Golgotha, we must look to the New Testament, the epistles, Acts, and Revelation, which provide the framework to interpret the historical event. These later texts construct a multi-layered theology of the atonement, utilizing 5 distinct, interlocking conceptual frameworks. This architecture forms an atonement matrix, a conceptual map that bridges the execution of a first-century rabbi with ancient Israelite scriptural precedent. These 5 frameworks are not competing theories. Early Christians required all of them to fully map the scope of God's redemptive activity. Distilling the cross into a single doctrine risks overlooking its canonical depth. The New Testament writers intentionally present multiple, simultaneous layers of meaning that require careful synthesis. To map the biblical solution to human rebellion, we must trace each of these 5 branches. The first node is typology. Here, the cross functions as the ultimate realization of the Old Testament's cultic and sacrificial system. Under the Old Covenant, animal sacrifices provided only a provisional, temporary cleansing. They anticipated a final, permanent sacrifice that would remove sin. We see this specific typology anchored in the Passover regulations of Exodus 12. The text instructs that the unblemished Passover lamb must not have its bones broken. This compares Exodus directly with John 19. The Gospel notes the Romans did not break Jesus' legs, framing him as the true Passover sacrifice. Then, Hebrews connects him to the Day of Atonement, as both high priest and unblemished sacrifice, offering his own blood. Christ's death established the final, eternal access to God's presence, fulfilling a function the old system could only perform provisionally. The second node frames the cross as an economic transaction of ransom and redemption. Mark chapter 10 and 1 Peter chapter 1 define this explicitly. A ransom is a literal price paid to liberate or purchase an enslaved people. When New Testament authors talk about this price, they rely on a linguistic tool called metonymy, where a single part represents the whole. They use blood as a direct, poetic substitute for Christ's death. However, this metaphor has strict theological constraints. We cannot push the economic imagery by asking to whom the ransom was paid. The biblical text avoids naming God or Satan as the recipient. The ransom motif's power lies in acknowledging the transaction's extreme cost, Christ's death, and the resulting liberation of the church. The third node is recapitulation. This is the theological concept where Jesus actively embodies, repeats, and succeeds in the historical destiny of Israel. At noon, an unnatural darkness falls over Golgotha. This physical manifestation of judgment shows the absolute withdrawal of the divine presence. In Matthew 27, Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He is suffering the ultimate covenantal exile by being actively forsaken by the Father. This diagram connects the Roman cross to the Hebrew concept of a tree. Deuteronomy 21 states anyone exposed on a tree is under God's curse. In Acts 5, early church leaders used this tree language to prove Jesus absorbed that specific covenantal curse. By hanging on a tree, Jesus voluntarily steps into Israel's exile, absorbing the fatal curse of the law so his people can be restored to God's presence. The fourth node shifts from retrospective history to prospective eschatology. The cross acts as a chronological trigger that inaugurates the eschaton, or the end times. The trial and execution of Jesus connect directly to the Son of Man prophecies recorded in the book of Daniel. Scholar Greg Beale argues that Jesus' crucifixion is the literal, historical beginning of the great end-time tribulation prophesied in Daniel chapter 7. Christ acts as the representative for the faithful saints of Israel, absorbing the initial lethal assault from the eschatological foe. The cross sets a permanent eschatological pattern. Just as Christ entered the tribulation and overcame through suffering, the early church understood they must do likewise. The final node is Christus Victor. This framework defines the cross as a definitive weapon of victory over the cosmic powers of evil. This chart maps the logical sequence Paul constructs in Colossians 2. Humanity carries a legal indebtedness, a record of sin standing as condemnation. Paul says this debt is nailed to the cross and canceled, directly resulting in the absolute disarming of demonic authorities. The cross neutralizes the accuser's primary weapon by removing the guilt of the accused. We see this Pauline logic expanded to a cosmic scale in Revelation chapter 12, where Satan is hurled out of heaven specifically by the blood of the Lamb. An instrument designed for supreme physical subjugation was the exact mechanism God utilized to permanently subvert and defeat spiritual darkness. Looking back at this assembled atonement matrix, we see how Golgotha is anchored by these 5 elements: cultic fulfillment, ransom, exile, tribulation, and victory. This densely layered theology allowed the early church to address the baseline problem of human alienation established in Genesis chapter 3. The cross simultaneously fulfills the scriptural past, redefines the present, and violently inaugurates the eschatological future. But there is a final, unavoidable tension. A theology of the cross is incomplete if it stops at the moment of death. A dead ransom payment cannot free anyone, and a dead victor cannot finalize a new covenant or rule a kingdom. The New Testament theology of Jesus' death inherently demands its own vindication, pointing directly to our next analysis, the theological mechanics of the resurrection.